Hello, and welcome to Underlords Universe, where we like to discuss the kinds of things, the kind of music that inspire us to continue to write and record our own. If you're interested in checking some of our stuff out, we do it under the banner Underlords of the Overworld. I'll put a link down below. And we just recently did a song with Blaze Bayley, which we thought turned out really, really well. If you're not familiar with him, he's the former vocalist of Iron Maiden. So anyway, that was great. I'll put a link down below. If you like what you see here, please subscribe to our channel and join in the conversations. I got my brother down below here and my fellow Underlord, and then our honorary Underlord going by the name of Dead Meat. If you've tuned into some of our stuff before, you might have seen him on our lengthy discussions of the Black Sabbath catalog. Today, we are going to be, we're not ranking anything today. We're just doing a discussion of the brand new Judas Priest record, Invincible Shield. Been a lot of reviews out there from a lot of different people, but this is going to be not so much, I mean, it's a sort of a review, but it's a discussion review. First impressions, second impressions, etc. And gosh, I don't know. Did I miss anything on that little intro there, guys?
No, you got it all.
Okay, sweet. Well, what are your guys' first impression? This came out like what, three weeks ago?
March 8th.
I don't even
March
remember.
8th.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But you know, I put it in like right away. You know, it's like this is one of those albums I wasn't gonna wait to listen to. So your guys' first impressions?
Well, Dead Meat.
Actually,
kick it off. Dead Meat.
Yeah.
I want to know your very, very first impressions, as in like the first 20 seconds, because I had like a very distinct, sort of something hitting my palate those first 20 seconds, and I'm going, where's this going? I think I've heard this before. What do those first 20 seconds tell you?
Brent?
All right, well, the first 20 seconds. Here's what I thought of. Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son album. Turbo.
Really? Interesting.
Turbo.
Yes.
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah. The very beginning also reminds me a lot of something you would hear on Seventh Son, that very beginning part. And then Turbo, and then later, the ending, the very ending is very reminiscent of the ending of Painkiller.
It is, very much.
So those three things together, there you go. That was my impression.
I didn't think of the Seventh Son thing, but Turbo definitely. It was like, wow. I mean, they're starting this album with something that's clearly a Turbo vibe, but at the same time, also very quickly saying, but this isn't Turbo.
Exactly.
Like,
but I gotta say, I absolutely love Turbo. And when they pulled that out, like in the Ripper years, they first started doing Turbo Lover again. I was ecstatic to hear that.
There's good stuff on Turbo. I like that album.
And I do, and it wasn't just the sort of reverby drums and all that, but like the guitar tone almost was reminiscent of like synth guitar,
in a way, yeah. So
yeah,
here's a question. Did you check out any of the tracks before the album came out, the singles, or you just wait till the album?
Now I'm just like so busy with everything else. I can't even get in the mindset, and I hate YouTube. So I want to listen to it on good speakers, whether it's car or my headphones or like whatever. And so when I put that in, it was completely blind. And I was pretty impressed from the get-go, I will say. With obviously the Turbo comparisons, but it sounded like Rob I was about to say back to form, but I think Firepower, Judas Priest was back to form, because my sort of fandom of Judas Priest has ebbs and flows, right? Especially with Nostradamus. It was like a huge misstep in my mind. Brian, you and I had talked about this before, but Redeemer of Souls, I could never get into that. And I couldn't name a single song off of it, because I just like, when I put it on, I'm like, okay, next. And so when Firepower came out, I was like, you were like, hey, have you heard it? I'm going, I'll get to it. I love Judas Priest. I'll definitely get to it. And I was blown away by Firepower. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I told you, I said, I think this might be the best Judas Priest album since Painkiller. And you responded. Do you remember what you responded?
It may be the best Judas Priest album they ever made.
Okay. Well, I think at the time you said since like British Steel but maybe ever. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I might be a little bit superlative there, but not entirely. It's funny. I had this. So let's just kind of pull back here for a second, because this is, with the new one, we're talking about the third album with Richie Faulkner in the mix as guitar player and co-writer. And I don't know. I agree with you. To me, Redeemer of Souls is a little lackluster. It's quite forget. It's not that it's bad. I do think Halls of Valhalla is great. I think Sword of Damocles is great, but it even sonically, it has a bit of that, with all due respect, and I love Glenn, but it's got that kind of Glenn Tipton production sound to it. And with Firepower, it was like, bam. I mean, that's, so
they needed a guitarist from hell to make that sound good.
Yeah, and they needed Andy Sneap, producing, and
right. Yeah, I guess producing. He didn't play on it, I guess, but yeah.
So yeah, okay. So that raises a question. Of course, everybody's concerned about Glenn and his progression with Parkinson's disease, and our mother has Parkinson's now too. So
oh wow,
it hits close to home. But having said that, I do want to mention, before we get any further on the songs on the album, I read a little interview with Ian Hill, and he made a reference. It was just a very casual passing reference to, Richie doing the guitars and Rob doing the vocals, blah, blah, blah. He didn't even mention Glenn.
I noticed that same thing.
And then in the liner notes, it says Judas Priest R, which is different than saying who played on it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the studio credits, guitars recorded at the Falcon's Nest, Nashville, Tennessee. It does say additional recording in Worcestershire, UK, which would be Glenn. And I have no doubt that they are keeping Glenn as involved as possible. We'll never know the extent. I'd like to think he's on the whole thing straight through.
Yeah.
But
so
I don't know. To that point, though, here's kind of where I'm going with this. In my mind, Richie is one of these rare dudes who has breathed new life into an old band. Not that the old guys couldn't do it; they can clearly do it, right? But these last two albums, especially, I just think are fantastic records.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my setup and the mindset I had going into it, because you asked about the initial first impressions, and it was like, yeah, this is smoking. Brent?
I watched a like a sit down interview with Scott, Ian, Richie, and Rob even pretty much said as much, that Richie is kind of stoked the fires, if you will, and really gotten them where they are with the recent records. And as far as Glenn's input, they didn't really address that either directly. As I'm listening through the record, I'm trying to see if I can maybe hear him. You can identify his playing, his leads. And I think I should have made a note when I heard it. There's one lead that I thought it was mixed a little bit lower in the mix. I forget what song it was, but when I go back, I'll be able to find it again. And I thought to myself, that's Glenn. I may be wrong.
Oh, yeah. Too bad you didn't make a note of that now. I want to know what it.
Me too.
I'll go back. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It was lower in the mix. You can really. I think Richie. I'm gonna guess Richie probably did 90% or more of the guitar work on the record, which is fine.
Yeah.
They continue to say Glenn is as involved as he ever was in the writing and arranging of the songs. He plays when he can. I did watch an interview with Ian recently where Ian was talking about Glenn, and he said, he just doesn't have the stamina and the dexterity that he used to have when he joins on stage when he can. He does studio work when he can. So
it's. I don't think he just recently came out and played encores with them. So that's great to see that. But I'm convinced he's on the record, that it's not just them saying that he is. But it's not. I think that's why it says additional recording in the UK.
Yeah,
and I would hope so, even if it's him just sort of playing underneath everybody, because I mean, even though he's not an original member, it's kind of funny to think.
right?
It's like Glenn is not an original member. Oh yeah,
but he is on
mean,
Rock-a-Rolla. So from
yeah,
that
yeah,
standpoint,
but even then he joined very late. He didn't have any songwriting on
true.
Rock-a-Rolla, I don't
right.
think.
That's right. Yeah.
And but he is almost, I think his name is at least as synonymous with Judas Priest as Rob, if not more, because so much more of the songwriting came from Glenn. And I do want to say this though about, is he or is he not on there? I'm listening to some of these leads and I'm pretty sure they're not Glenn. However, Richie Faulkner, if it is him doing all the leads or 99% of the leads, he has done something amazing, and he has tapped into both KK and Glenn's style. There's a number of leads on there where I go, that is almost like a signature Glenn style. And for me, I'm not very lead guitarist oriented. I definitely appreciate like the Randy Rhoads or the Glenn Tiptons, where their solos just sort of sing. They've got this like beautiful melody. And obviously Beyond the Realms of Death, one of like the greatest guitar solos out there. And Brian, when you and I saw Judas Priest last time, Richie took the guitar solo. I just kind of assumed like Andy was going to assume the Glenn Tipton role. I wasn't as familiar with his style, but it was Richie. And I do have to say I was a little disappointed in his Beyond the Realms of Death, because I'm just like, man, it is so distinctly Glenn that it's very hard to match that. But somehow throughout this album, so many of the leads I'm listening to and saying, it's probably not Glenn, but he really tapped into that Glenn style. And they kind of go back and forth almost as if it was like the whole trading guitar thing, where this is more whammy oriented, which is KK. This is more technical.
So to that point, when I listen to it, I just kind of say to myself, I know a little bit about what he's fighting, a little bit. But by all accounts, he's on it. So if I hear something that sounds like Glenn, I'm just going to say, yeah, that's Glenn. I mean, there's no major reason to not think that. Again, that's why I think it says additional recording. I think probably a lot of those rhythms and everything and stuff are by Richie. But
at the very least, I wonder if Glenn, maybe could have written the solo and said, okay, here's what it sounds like. Now let's speed it up and you do it, because it is so uniquely. I mean, Touch of Evil is another one. Or going back to Turbo, one of my favorite guitar solos is Turbo Lover, for God's sake. I don't what Glenn does on that. I'm just going, okay.
Well, this solo that I heard that I thought was him, after I heard it, I thought to myself, well, this is something that I think, given his condition, probably could play. It wasn't something like freakishly long or anything like that. So
let's get into the songs themselves here, because going back to this idea of first impression, my first impression of the whole album though was, this is great, but I loved Firepower. And my first impression actually was that this is great. It's a great record, but it's not quite Firepower. That was my first impression. And
me too.
Okay.
Me too.
The reason I felt that was because to me, on Firepower, the only song that dips for me is Flamethrower. I don't think that's great, but I think there's a few dips on Invincible Shield. I'm still not really wild about the title track.
Me either.
Trial by Fire is okay. I don't dislike it, but it doesn't blow me away. And Sons of Thunder. And then as far as the bonus tracks, we'll get into those separately for those
Sons of Thunder, aka Children of the Sun Part 2.
Part 2, which I can see why you say that. It's kind of weird if somebody listens to this on streaming, like on Spotify, the only option is the deluxe version. So most people that stream stuff, they're going to have those 3 extra songs, because that's what's available. It's like the only version that has just the standard 11 tracks are like the Amazon purchases and whatever. But if you got this from like Target, or if you got an import from the UK, then you got all 13 or 14 songs. But the rest of it to me is just on fire. I mean, The Serpent and the King, like, wow, that could be song of the year for me. Devil in Disguise, Gates of Hell. I mean, I think those are just great songs. They're, to me, these are like earworm songs. I start hearing them in my head. Like I'm at work in the middle of the day, and suddenly I'm hearing Rob Halford, you know, with some of these
Now, how about
songs
this
like
though?
Escape from
Serpent and the
Reality and
King.
say what?
Serpent and the King
Yeah.
is, yes, it's a killer song, but the best riff in that song, in my opinion, is the one they play under the chorus.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
was going to say the same
I
thing.
know. Because there's
I'm just
such a
waiting for it to come to
groove.
the chorus, not only because choruses are fun to sing along to or whatever, but I'm like, that guitar riff. I
Oh,
want to hear it.
and
Yes.
the groove underneath that riff. It just,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
for a song that's that heavy to have that kind of groove is just they just nailed that.
Yeah.
And for Rob at his age to sound that good, I don't care how many takes it took. I don't give a I don't give a crap. I don't care.
Yeah.
How can a man his age do this?
Because what is he,
72?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading some message boards somewhere, and someone's like, "Oh, there's clearly that there's so much like auto tune," and I'm going, "No, not quite," because he comes out opening night. I don't like YouTube, but I will watch it for concert footage or whatever. Opening night of the Invincible Shield tour, I think it was in the UK. He comes out, and voice right off the bat, they're playing Panic Attack. A little shaky, all right, and he's always been that way, even in his prime. His voice is a little shaky sometimes in 1984, like whatever. And then when it gets to the high notes, he nails it. So clearly there's no backing tracks or anything, because otherwise they would have and sometimes that mid-range stuff is the hardest to sing. It's not the highest stuff or the lowest stuff, it's the mid-range stuff.
Well, yeah.
So yeah,
and
Rob is kicking ass out there.
The other thing about that is I think that there's oftentimes maybe an assumption that because you can manipulate some stuff in the studio, that therefore you can just, it's like this, artificial intelligence, it just does it, and the artist doesn't have to do anything, and that's not true. I mean, like auto-tune is a pitch correction software, and it's like, okay, so if you have a bum note, you can just move it, right? But that you can't replicate the power of Rob's voice. You can't replicate the tonal quality of his voice. I mean, obviously you can EQ it and all that other kind of stuff, but you got to have something there to EQ in the first place. And
well,
this is just great stuff.
Well, and Rob has said that in the studio that it sometimes does take, he does a number of takes, but that from a production standpoint, they want to get it as good as they could, so they push each other to do the best that they can, as they should in the studio. And he says Andy's pretty much a perfectionist, so if he does a take and Andy thinks he can do it better, he'll have him do it again. So who cares if it took him 20 takes?
And these are, but so to your point, Brent, if you're doing 20 takes, you're doing a performance. You're not just just by comparison. For example, I listened to the new Ace Frehley album again recently, and on one of the songs, there's a certain kind of vocalism in a chorus, and it's like, okay, I can tell that's been copied and pasted, because this little tiny sound in the back of his throat, it's just kind of an awkward, weird kind of little thing. And it's like, you can do that, but even that, you still had to have a performance to copy and paste in the first place. And I'm not saying that Rob does that here, but I mean, these are guys that have been recording old school recording for their entire careers. Why would they just cut corners now? And I don't think you put out an album that's this good by cutting corners.
Yeah.
It has too much life to it. It's not sterile. It breathes, it moves. I think it's fantastic. This might be a year for me. And that's how much I like Firepower, because I still don't think it may not be quite as good as Firepower though. So,
well, to Travis's point, I think the true test is that how they perform the tracks live, and he hits the notes live, and we've seen him in person hit the notes live, and recently, like within the last few years. It's incredible.
But I think that the writing on these last couple albums, the writing on this record is so good. Like I said, the earworms, they just get stuck in your head. It's like the ability to pull out melodies like this at this stage of their career, I think says something. I think especially Rob as the melody vocalist writer guy, I think that really says something about his talent as a writer. And I don't think he necessarily gets name checked as one of the great all-time great. Yes, he gets name checked as one of the all-time great vocalists in metal, but one of the all-time great writers in metal.
And here's how good of a writer he is. When you listen to Devil in Disguise, in one of the first lyrics, he says, like a twinkle in his eye, and automatically I want to throw up a little bit. I don't want to hear the word twinkle in my heavy metal albums.
Okay.
Halfway through, and then and not only that, and then he goes Fran tick tick tick, and I have flashbacks to Saint Anger. Fran tick 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 tock. Have you heard Saint Anger?
Please
a
don't.
Little band called Metallica, but
I don't.
Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's enough.
And so I'm just like, oh God, Rob, why are you doing that? Halfway through the song, I've forgotten about any grievance I have with the word twinkle or Fran tick tick tick. And I'm just like, this is an amazing song. Don't change a thing, Rob. You're the genius. I'm just here along for the ride. So clearly don't listen to some random dude in Iowa, because that song is killer. He doesn't need to change a thing.
No. And
I think he's really developed as a lyricist. I'm not really much into the lyrics as I am the melodies and whatnot, but I think I haven't found myself looking at the lyrics. I think he's come a long way as a lyricist. Not that he was ever bad, but he comes up with really good melodies and he comes up with really good lyrics, I think, and that's demonstrated again on this record, as it was with Firepower, and even on the album prior to that.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just make a sort of a comparison, I guess a metaphor, if you will, Firepower and Invincible Shield, it kind of reminds me of movies where there's a sequel which is really good, but in different ways. And the only one I could think of was Alien and Aliens.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like that comparison but it was the best I could come up with, because I love Firepower. As I'm listening to this, I'm going, Firepower is a superior album, but Invincible Shield is great. And me personally, I actually like Aliens better than Alien. I'm a bigger James Cameron fan than a Ridley Scott fan. Both great movies, though. But it's just sort of like where you got the first one, it's more sort of suspense driven, and it's got kind of more moods, and it's almost more creativity. And then Aliens comes along, and it's just like a just shoot 'em up fest, just like constant wall to wall action. So I kind of think in that way the comparison is okay. But like I said, I don't like Alien as much as Aliens. And here's what I'm about to tell you guys. Listening to this every day since it first came out, my opinion has changed somewhat after like the first 10 listens. I actually think Invincible Shield might be better than Firepower.
And to that point, I am moving in that direction.
Okay.
I think Firepower might have been the more immediate record. I still don't. I'm still not convinced that Invincible Shield is better than Firepower, but I find myself moving in that direction.
And the thing is, Firepower is a very diverse album.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I listen to Invincible Shield, there's almost like a subtle diversity. But like Trial by Fire, I know you said you were kind of, meh about that. That might be one of my favorite tracks. It's got this kind of like off-time signature, these unique vocals. One of the things I really am sort of annoyed by is when Halford doesn't, go for like any high notes in a song. It's like you got to do it at least once or something. And in that song, I can't quite remember offhand, but I think he might only do the high notes one single time. And it's awesome. It makes that, I was listening to it for the first time and I'm going, God, I think I really like this, but there's no high notes. And then he gets to the part, I think I have it written down here, where it's like, oh no, that's Escape from Reality, which is another one of my favorites. Those are the two back to back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that those might be the two best songs back to back for my money.
I wanted to ask you guys.
Well, real
go
quick
ahead,
though,
Brian.
because if I had said Trial by Fire was one of the lower points in the record, I misspoke. It's to me, it's Crown of Horns and the title track.
Oh, okay.
Sons of Thunder. Those three I'm not quite sold on.
Actually,
So
I agree. Maybe not about the title track, but definitely Crown of Horns and Sons of Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you guys then. So let's go through, and why don't you name your just kind of go through your favorite songs on the record?
Can't. I mean, to me, I can't.
I can
because
so I will if you want me.
Well, it just kind of. I mean, it's like, to me, this is one of those albums where I say to myself, okay, you know, like Serpent and the King. If you pushed me to pick one, I'd say that. But then I'm like, yeah, but how do you? But Devil in Disguise, man. I mean,
I'm not saying.
But Gates of Hell is great. So my point is that every time the next song comes on, with just a couple of exceptions, that's my favorite one, and that's why this is becoming potentially. And I'm gonna try to rate and rank these to figure it out, but they're both so good, and it may end up being album of the year. But short answer to your question is I'm not going to pick one. I can't.
No, not one. I'm going to list all. I'm going to tell you my favorite songs.
Okay. Well, okay. Let me restate my point.
No, I get it. I get what you're saying.
No, but I'm going to restate it anyway, whether you get it or not. Those three songs I mentioned: Invincible Shield, Crown of Horns, and Sons of Thunder. Those are my dipping. The rest of them are like stellar.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, that's the answer to the question. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, mine, it would be Panic Attack, Serpent and the King, Devil in Disguise, As God Is My Witness, Trial by Fire, Escape from Reality, which there's a line in that song where Rob sounds a lot like Ozzy. That's another thing I noticed. I also watched a review of this record, and somebody else noted the same thing.
Well, that's interesting because I don't like Ozzy that much, but anyway.
Well, neither here nor there, but he sounds almost exactly like Ozzy.
That actually is here or there, because I didn't notice that, and since I'm not a huge Ozzy fan, if I had noticed that, that would have been a bit of a cringe moment for me, but it wasn't.
Well, and then I would follow up and say Giants in the Sky and Fight of Your Life. So those 8 tracks would be, and Fight of Your Life is a bonus track.
Okay, well, that's now you're segueing into the bonus tracks, which again, if you're just listening on Spotify, they're just tracks. But let's address those bonus tracks, shall we?
Yeah. Let's do it.
I think Fight of Your Life is as good or better than some of the other. Honestly, I think Fight of Your Life is better than the title track. I like it more than Crown of Horns, and I like it more than Sons of Thunder. I think it's a really good song. I think it's a good melodic song. I think Vicious Circle is fine. I don't have a problem with Vicious Circle, but it's just kind of there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then to me, The Lodger doesn't even belong on this.
I agree.
Well,
and but here's why. Here's why. I'm not saying that it's good or bad by saying that. I don't think it fits the record at all. Like, I can see why that would be considered a quote unquote bonus track. To me, The Lodger sounds like a song, like a one-off song that they would have recorded for a movie soundtrack. It just doesn't sound like the rest of the record. And that's because Bob Halligan Jr. wrote it, and sonically it's a little different.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really like it that much. I mean, it's okay.
I don't either, and I don't think it ends the album well. It's not a good album closer, and I watched an interview with the guys, and they talked about that song in particular, and Rob said, as far as the sequencing goes, it wouldn't fit anywhere else in the record.
Good, then don't put it on the record. So that's
I disagree. I got to stand up for The Lodger and Bob Halligan.
I don't like it.
I got to stand up for my fellow Irishman, Bob Halligan. I'm assuming he's Irish. I read that he did like a Celtic Christian band or something like that's his main band.
No.
I'm like, okay. Anyway, I love the song. And yeah, it doesn't quite fit, but that's why it's a bonus track. And when you think of, okay, this I'm going back to a cinematic comparison here. There is the movie The Ring. You guys seen The Ring?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I love The Ring, by the way. The Ring 2 came out. It was tonally very different from The Ring. they actually released a 15-minute sort of segue just called Rings. And it was like exclusive to the DVD pack. And it just sort of tied the two together, since the Ring 2 is barely a sequel to the Ring. It's just, anyway, you know, I kind of think of the Lodger as maybe the rings of, you know, that sort of Ring 1 and 2. It's sort of there. It doesn't have to be part of it, and it's a bonus track, you know. So I don't necessarily think of it as an album closer. Giants in the Sky, or Children of the Sun Part 2. That's a good closer. The Lodger is just a good segue into whatever comes next. I don't know. I think it's a great song. It's moody as hell. And just speaking of all my cinematic references, and like you said, it's very theatrical. And I always love the theatrical stuff. So yeah, it might be the least Judas Priesty song of the bunch.
So here,
I'm okay with that.
here's and this is getting into the weeds on being nitpicky, but here's how I would address that if I were you, because I don't necessarily disagree. I see what you're saying, but here's what I would do then. I wouldn't bunch it. I wouldn't put it together with the other two bonus tracks. I would put the other two tracks, I'd make it a 13-song record. And I would sequence Fight of Your Life and Vicious Circle in the body of the rest of the record. And then I would also add, if they insisted on having the Lodger on the record, I would actually, after Giants in the Sky, I would have an extended 10-15 second break to give the listener, for those few people out there like us who listen to albums as full works of art, that kind of breather of, okay, Giants in the Sky ends the album proper, and then you get this weird thing. And I would have been more accepting of it in that sense. But I get it. I'm being nitpicky. That's just kind of where my head goes as a sequence, like if I'm sequencing the record.
Now, I'm going to say something controversial here, but Fight for Your Life, I would almost say that fits less well on the record than the Lodger. But I'm not saying it doesn't sound Judas Priesty. In fact, it sounds very Judas Priesty, circa 1979, 78. There's a lot of overtones of Killing Machine and Better by You, Better Than Me on there. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, you know, I do like it overall. It's just a little, I don't know. I don't know if that one fits the tone.
Well,
but that also acts as a segue to the remainder of the bonus tracks. So by the time I get to the Lodger, I'm already kind of out of the Invincible Shield realm, and I'm ready for some unique stuff. I want more Priest because it's a damn good album. Give me more.
And I can see what you're saying about Fight of Your Life from a writing standpoint. I mean, sonically though, it's right in with the rest of the record though. So, you know, and my guess is that these were all discussions about what makes the proper record most cohesive. And there were probably some disagreements in there about, well, does Fight of Your Life really fit here? Does Vicious Circle really fit here? Certainly the Lodger doesn't really fit there, but we like them, and so we're going to make them bonus tracks. That's my guess here. So
I think you're right.
But
now, on that same token, we've all kind of said Crown of Horns, you know, are one of our least favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah,
it's one of those
where
it's
not like it's
it's not bad. I don't dislike it by any means. I am glad that it's on the album, and I'm glad it is where it is at on the album. Because sometimes, you know, we had our Dehumanizer discussion. We all kind of, for the most part, with a few exceptions with you guys, who said there's a track or two here that you know, dipped a little further than the rest. Sometimes some of the best albums, they have that little intermission point where it's like, okay, we got kind of slow song, you know, nothing special to it, but it's almost a breather, and it's not bad. So I'm glad it's there. And then by the time you get back to As God Is My Witness, I mean, you're just like, all right, I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. I think albums have to have stuff like that. So even if I give a song, if I'm rating a song on our 5-point system, and if I give a song a 3, you know, that's certainly not a 5, but it doesn't mean I'd take it off the record. You know, I completely agree, because you need the ebb and flow
there you go.
of an album. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you guys think? What do you think about the sequencing overall? Because I think it's pretty good. I think it does ebb and flow really well.
Yeah, other than that stuff with the bonus tracks, I think the flow is excellent. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of albums really sort of taper off towards the end, and this doesn't. I mean, like we've all kind of said, Escape from Reality, Trial by Fire, particularly strong tracks for that late in an album.
Right.
So yeah, I'm on board with the sequencing. I mean, God, they hit so many good points of here's one thing. I will stand up for Invincible Shield, even though I kind of agree the song. I kind of agree with you. It's not necessarily one of my favorites. It reminds me so much of Rapid Fire. And I sometimes I hate it when people say, "Oh, this is like Rapid Fire," and you know, it's what I'm saying is it just reminds me of it. I don't think it in any way is a ripoff or you know playing off of a trope, so to speak. But it does have like the dueling guitar thing in it, where I can almost hear the KK Glenn, or is it Richie Glenn, or is it Richie Richie? But it's done so well. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but it saves I don't want to say lackluster track, but it takes a track that I wouldn't appreciate as much and just kicks it up a notch because of that. And speaking of what is it, Killing Machine that Exciter's off of? There's a moment in there that really reminds me of Exciter. Which one?
What was the question?
What album is Exciter off?
Stained Class.
Stained Class. Okay. Right around that time period though. But there's a moment in that one that also reminds me of Exciter. So, you know, you get these kind of throwbacks and they're done so tastefully that it's like, all right, you're not putting that in there just to make, you know, people like us geek out. In fact, the average person listening to that probably wouldn't even get that. But yeah, just, you know, cool stuff like that.
Speaking of
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
no, go.
I have a question for you guys. Before the album came out, Richie was interviewed and he said one of the words he used to describe the new songs was progressive. Now, do you see any of that in these songs, any of these songs? I actually don't really see it, and I don't know what he meant by progressive, but is that something that you think in any way, shape, or form kind of applies to these songs? Any of them?
In the loosest sense, yeah. I remember he said that, but I completely forgot until you mentioned that. You know, I do think again, Trial by Fire and Escape from Reality, it's kind of such a shift that in some ways it has progressive elements. You know, it's kind of like how Uriah Heep is considered by some to be a progressive band. You know, they do have progressive elements, but I don't see that as much. That's literally where you got to blur the line so much to say, okay, yeah, I guess they're progressive, but there's more, you know, hard rock with a few progressive elements or whatever. So I can see a little bit.
I think that's a really good comparison, the Uriah Heep comparison in terms of the progressive. Certainly, we're not talking about like whether like Yes or early Genesis or anything. That's obvious, but I think that Uriah Heep comparison is pretty similar. You know, I do hear in things like the little licks, like going from the verse and the chorus and stuff to like Devil in Disguise. I think there's some stuff in there that's deceptively progressive. And if you listen carefully enough, I think that there's like slight changes, like, well, you know, the first time around on this, they do it this way. The second time around, they kind of make this slight change in it here. And so I think that's kind of what he's referring to. And I do see some of that as a little bit more proggy than what you got on Firepower. But yeah. You were mentioning kind of like, you know, hearkening back to the past. What does the back cover look like to you guys?
Redeemer of Souls.
I guess I paid such little attention to
a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking Hero.
That too.
I think much more Hero. Which of course is obviously a compilation of the first two records, but
of course, this cover reminds me of Demolition, actually.
Really?
In a very basic sort of way. but it's just sort of like fireball thing coming out, and it's kind of plain. And I almost wore my Demolition shirt, but I would have had to dig it out of a box somewhere. So
good for you for having one. I don't.
Hey, I love that era. I haven't listened to either of those albums in a long time, but in a large way, that is actually responsible for me getting into Priest. Priest was actually one of the last bands I got into in the from Sabbath to Kiss, Deep Purple, all that, and then Priest was sort of at the tail end. So, and that was around the Live 98 era.
Oh yeah.
So
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So anyway, I mean, it's funny. There's obviously people with much greater reach than us, review this stuff, and that's great, But I just like to have, it's like we're all getting these new releases, and it's like I just want to have a conversation, So it's not so much a review, like here's my review of the new record. It's just just a good conversation about a new record from a band that we love. And the fact that we're sitting here doing this in 2024, talking about the new Judas Priest record is it's kind of insane, It
really is.
So, but at any rate, I think, I give it a huge thumbs up.
Yeah.
When I get the time, I'm going to start going through the whole Judas Priest catalog, because I want to kind of see where it ultimately falls. But Brent, I know at some point you'll do that. Travis, maybe not, but at the very least,
I will be watching your reviews of that, but that's one I don't think I could.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. You will. We'll be getting you in on the when the Sabbath box set comes out with the Tony Martin stuff. We'll be talking about that. So,
and it's time for Forbidden Redemption.
I'm eager to hear what the remix of that sounds like. So,
oh my God,
do you guys have? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so am I, and I'm a big defender of it, but I'm hoping it sounds a lot better than it does.
Yeah. Well, anyway, back to Judas Priest, and to close this out, do you guys have any other final thoughts on Invincible Shield? I give it a big thumbs up.
I give it a thumbs up. Did you guys know that Rob Halford has been working on a blues album?
Yeah.
So that's the next thing we get to hear from Rob will be a blues album.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the guy's a legend. He's earned the right to do what he wants. He did that with 2, and I actually appreciate that album.
I like 2.
He did that with his Christmas album, and kind of painful, if you ask me. And I'm a Christmas music fan too, but it's just like
I'm seeing a whole nother episode here. So let's not go too far down those roads. But
you just want to make sure to mention that the music just keeps flowing. Like, these guys are not showing any signs of slowing down at all.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
And I know we mentioned it in the Sabbath thing, but Rob, if you're listening, first of all, I totally apologize for anything bad I said about you. Second of all, get that Black Sabbath 1992 opening for Ozzy shows released.
I know.
Well, now it'll never happen with Sharon.
Yeah.
But my God, I want a soundboard recording of that.
I know. It'd be great. Yeah.
Talk about a legend. Anyway.
Okay. So we're digressing here probably a little bit too much, but yeah. So it looks like overall we pretty much have the same kind of opinion as longtime Judas Priest fans. We all 3 of us give this a big thumbs up. We're really, really happy with it, right?
Yeah, big time. Like I said, I think it, and I haven't gone back and listened to Firepower, so maybe my view will change once I do, but right now I think it is the best thing probably since Painkiller.
Yeah, and I'm going to be giving Firepower a spin here again soon, because I have that same curiosity. It's like I just, my first impression was it wasn't that it's great, but not quite Firepower, because I absolutely loved Firepower. But I don't know. Well, I'm going to put it to the test. I'm going to put it to the test. Okay.
All right.
Last words from you guys.
I listened to Firepower the other night for that same reason, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well, isn't this a great problem to have?
Yeah.
Which of the last two which of the two most recent Judas Priest albums are the best? And I mean that's a great problem, you know, to have.
It
so
is.
yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Are we closing out then for the
All right, stay tuned for our Aliens review.
We could
right?
do that. Dude, I would do that. We can do
Now
that.
we're heading out to the highway, right? We're gonna.
Yeah.
That was a
All
bad.
right.
Sorry, that was low hanging fruit. I had to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you've stuck with us this long, thank you. And you know, throw a comment in there if you have a thought of your own about the new Judas Priest record, Invincible Shield, and check out the links to our stuff. That'd be really cool. Really appreciate that. And until next time, see you guys later.